Snow fell in heavy, wet clumps, melting on my shoulders before I could shake them off. The night was dark enough to swallow a man whole, but the firelight ahead cut a trembling circle into it. I hadn't planned on stopping, not with riders somewhere behind me and a price on my head. But warmth has a way of loosening a man's resolve. I eased forward through the pines until the glow grew strong enough to show me who sat by it. He couldn't have been more than 9. Thin as a fence rail, wrapped in a wool blanket that was more holes than cloth. He stirred a blackened pot over the flames, his small hands red from the cold. No rifle in sight. No sign of any grown folk. Just the boy, the pot, and a shack leaning into the wind a dozen paces off. His eyes lifted to mine like he'd been expecting me. Calm, steady, and far too old for his years. "I'll give you my blanket," he said, voice carrying in the stillness, "if you stay." It was a strange thing to hear out here, stranger still from a boy alone. I didn't answer at first. My mind weighed the risk. Staying meant being found, leaving meant facing the cold and whoever was on my trail. The boy kept stirring his stew, like whether I took his offer or not didn't matter a lick to him. "Where's your folks?" I asked, stepping into the circle of light. "Pa went hunting. Be back soon," he said. His tone told me it wasn't the whole truth. "And your ma?" He hesitated just long enough to confirm what I suspected. "Past last winter." The pot hissed as something inside boiled over. He didn't flinch, just lifted it off the flames and set it in the snow. The scent of rabbit, or something close enough to it, drifted up, mixing with the sharp bite of pine smoke. My stomach answered before my mouth could. I crouched down, keeping one hand near the revolver on my hip. "You always invite strangers to your fire?" "Only the cold ones." I couldn't help the twitch of a grin. "You're a bold one." A sound carried through the night, then, distant but distinct. Hoofbeats. 2 horses moving slow. I straightened and scanned the black between the trees. Lantern light flashed once, then vanished. The boy's gaze followed mine and his face didn't change. "They'll kill you," he said quietly. "Stay here. I can hide you." My jaw tightened. "You know them." "Everybody knows them." His voice had a weight to it, like the name of the men didn't need saying. "They come from town. Take what they want." The hoofbeats grew louder. I stepped back into the shadows at the edge of the firelight. "Why help me?" He shrugged, drawing the blanket tighter around himself. "You look like you need a friend." It had been years since anyone had called me that. The word cut deeper than I cared to admit. I took the offered blanket without thinking, rough wool scratching my palms. It was still warm from his body. He moved to ladle out a portion of stew into a dented tin cup and held it toward me. "Eat fast." The riders were closer now, low voices drifting between the thud of hooves. I downed the stew in a few burning swallows, the heat spreading down my chest like a spark catching tinder. Lantern light slid over the trunks, shadows jumping. I caught sight of their faces, lean, sharp, with eyes that missed nothing. They were the sort of men who carried trouble like other men carried knives. The boy didn't move from his seat. He looked right at them as they rode in, his small face unreadable. One of the men swung down from his horse, boots crunching in the snow. The other stayed mounted, his hand easy on the butt of a rifle. "Evenin', kid," the one on foot said, a grin bending his mouth in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "Your pa around?" "No," the boy said simply. The man's gaze slid to me, taking in my coat, my worn boots, my hand near my gun. "Who's your friend?" "Just passing through," I said. "That right?" His eyes narrowed. "Funny thing. A fella fitting your description rode out of town in a hurry this morning. Sheriff be mighty interested to have a word with him." "I'm not looking for words," I said. The man's grin widened. "Didn't figure you were." He tipped his head toward the mounted one. "We'll come back tomorrow. Your pa better be here." His eyes lingered on the shack. "Might be we help ourselves to whatever's inside, if he ain't." The boy didn't flinch. "You won't find anything worth taking." The men laughed a low, ugly sound and mounted up. The horses turned, snow spraying under their hooves, and they disappeared into the dark as quietly as they'd come. When the sound faded, I let out a breath I hadn't meant to hold. The boy reached for the pot, refilling my cup like the encounter hadn't happened. "They'll be back," he said. "They always come back." I studied him over the rim of the cup. "You shouldn't be alone out here." "I'm not," he said, looking straight at me. We ate in silence, the fire snapping between us. My mind kept circling back to his father, 2 days gone hunting, with men like that prowling the woods. The boy's calm didn't feel like ignorance. It felt like he already knew the worst and had decided not to let it break him. Later, when the fire burned low and the wind began to moan through the trees, I offered to keep watch. He just nodded and curled up near the coals. I wrapped the blanket tighter and walked the edge of the camp, my boots whispering over crusted snow. I couldn't stop thinking about the sound of those horses, the glint of lantern light on gunmetal. They weren't just looking for me, they had business here. And if the boy's father didn't return by morning, I had the uneasy feeling I'd be the only thing standing between him and whatever came out of the dark. The night pressed close, thick with the smell of smoke and frost. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled long and low. I rested a hand on my revolver and kept walking, the boy's words echoing in my mind. "You look like you need a friend." I didn't know yet if that was true, but I knew one thing: the boy needed more than a friend. He needed someone willing to stay. And for the first time in a long while, I thought maybe I would. The boy woke me before dawn, a hand on my shoulder, his voice low. "They're back." I blinked away the frost in my lashes and listened. Hoofbeats again, 2 sets, moving at a walk, deliberate. The kind of pace men use when they know their prey can't run far. I rose, flexing cold stiff fingers around the grip of my Colt. The fire was nothing but embers now, casting faint red on the snow. The boy stood close, the blanket dragging in the drifts, his breath ghosting in the air. "They said they'd come," he murmured. I motioned toward the shack. "Inside. Lock the door." He shook his head. "If they want in, they'll get in. Best we face M here." For a boy his size, his voice carried no fear. That unsettled me more than the hoofbeats. He'd seen too much for his age, seen enough to know the shape of danger. The riders came into view, horses snorting steam in the cold. Same two from last night. The one who'd spoken before wore the same smirk, like the snow and the miles between hadn't touched him. The other, older and thicker through the shoulders, kept his eyes on me. "Well, well," the smirking one said, swinging down from his saddle. "Look who decided to keep our boy company. You must like trouble." "Some trouble's better than being cold," I said. His eyes narrowed, just enough to show I'd hit something raw. He stepped closer, boots crunching through the frost. "Name doesn't matter. Matters to me." "Then call me what you want." He studied me, jaw working. "Fine. I'll call you Dead if you don't step aside." His gaze flicked toward the shack. "We're here for what's inside." The boy spoke then, sharp as a whip crack. "You'll get nothing. Pa'll be back any minute." That earned a short, humorless laugh. "Your pa won't be back. Not in one piece, anyway." I didn't like the way he said it. There was knowledge there, knowledge a man didn't have unless he'd been close to the truth. "What happened to him?" I asked. "Ask the crows," the older one said, his voice like gravel. The boy's face didn't move, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. I stepped between him and the men. "You've had your say. Now ride on." The smirker tilted his head. Or I make you." A slow grin spread across his mouth. "Ain't smart to threaten men who've got friends in every saloon from here to the river." I didn't blink. "Ain't smart to threaten a man who's got nothing left to lose." Silence stretched. Snowflakes spiraled between us. Then he spat into the snow and swung back onto his horse. "We'll be back before sundown. You best be gone by then. Both of you." They rode off, the sound of their hooves fading into the trees. The boy didn't speak until they were gone. "They're not bluffing. They'll come back." I turned to him. "What aren't you telling me?" He looked toward the woods. "Pa went after them 2 days ago. Took the rifle and the horse. Said he'd bring back what they stole. He didn't. You think they—" "I don't think," he said flatly. "I know." I exhaled slow, watching the steam drift. "And you stayed here alone?" "I've been alone since Ma died." He met my gaze, something defiant in it. But now you're here. There wasn't much I could say to that. We spent the morning in a tense quiet. I helped him bring in more wood, cleared a path from the shack to the well. My eyes kept sliding to the treeline, half expecting to see a flash of movement. By midday, the wind picked up, dragging low clouds across the sky. The boy ladled stew from last night's pot, the thin broth steaming in the cold. "You were a soldier," he said, like he already knew the answer. I didn't confirm or deny. "Why do you think that?" "You look like you've been shot before." I almost smiled. "Once or twice." "Did you win?" I thought of mud, smoke, the heat of blood soaking my shirt. "No one wins in war, kid." He didn't reply. We ate in silence, the wind rattling the shack's loose boards. A sound broke the stillness, a sharp, high howl. Not a wolf this time. Coyotes, closer than they'd been last night. The boy set his cup down, his small hand resting on the knife at his belt. "You got more than that knife in there?" I asked, nodding toward the shack. He shook his head. "Just Pa's old shotgun. Only 2 shells." I frowned. "That's something at least." We went inside. The shack smelled of wood smoke and old dust. A single cot, a table, a chest in the corner. He pulled the shotgun from under the cot, barrel rusted, stock cracked, but still serviceable. I checked the shells. "We'll save these. Last resort." "What's the first resort?" I looked at him, not letting them get close enough to matter. The afternoon dragged. Clouds thickened, pressing the light down until it felt like evening. I kept my coat on, revolver at my side, eyes on the narrow window facing the trail. The boy sat cross-legged on the floor, carving a bit of wood into something unrecognizable. Every so often he glanced at me like he was trying to decide whether I was worth trusting. "You could leave," he said finally. "I could," I agreed. "You won't." I didn't answer. He went back to carving. The hoofbeats came sooner than I'd hoped, 3 this time. The sound rolled over the snow, steady and slow. "They brought a friend," I muttered. We moved to the back of the shack. "There's a root cellar under the floor," he whispered. "Pa dug it for bad weather." I lifted the trapdoor. Dark space below, cool and smelling of earth. "Get in." He hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind." The knock on the door wasn't polite. Wood rattled under the impact. "Come on out, hero," the smirking voice called. "No sense hiding. We just want to talk." I stayed silent. The knock came again, harder. Last chance. Snow crunched outside the window. One of them was circling. I eased the boy down into the cellar. "Stay quiet." Then I moved to the side of the door, hand on my gun. The latch gave under a hard kick. The door swung wide and the first man stepped through, the grin already on his lips. I hit him hard with the barrel of my Colt, dropping him into the snow. The second came fast, rifle raised. I fired once, the crack deafening in the small space. He fell back, rifle slipping from his grasp. The third man bolted, boots pounding over snow. I didn't chase. My breath came in harsh bursts, the smell of powder thick in the air. The boy climbed out of the cellar, eyes wide but steady. He looked at the bodies, then at me. "They'll bring more." "I know." We dragged the living one, barely, outside, left him in the snow where the cold would do its work. I kept my eyes on the tree line, waiting for more shapes to appear. None did. Night fell hard and fast. The wind sharpened, cutting through the gaps in the shack's walls. We barred the door and sat close to the fire, neither of us speaking. It was the boy who broke the silence. "You could have run when they came through the door. Why didn't you?" I stared into the flames. "You gave me your blanket. Guess I owe you." He nodded like that made perfect sense. "Then you'll stay." The way he said it left no room for question. And maybe, for the first time in a long while, I didn't want to argue. But as the fire burned low, I couldn't shake the thought that before this was done, the men from town would come back, and they wouldn't be knocking. The wind shifted near midnight, carrying with it the scent of smoke that didn't belong to our fire. I woke to the boy's hand shaking my shoulder. His eyes were wide but calm, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're here." I didn't need to ask who. I could hear them, Horses snorting in the dark, muffled curses carried on the wind. More than 3 this time. The boards of the shack groaned as the cold pressed harder, but it was the soft crunch of boots in snow that put my hand on the Colt before I was even upright. The boy passed me the old shotgun. I set it beside him. 2 shells. Make them count. Stay low. Through the narrow window, shapes moved against the pale snow, 4, maybe 5 men. One carried a torch, the flames snapping in the wind. They were spreading out, not rushing, taking their time. They meant to box us in. A voice called from the dark, too loud for the hour. Thought we told you to be gone. It was the smirker. His tone was almost cheerful, like this was a social call. Now, we're going to help you along. The torch-bearer stepped closer to the shack, holding the flame high. Light bled through the gaps in the boards, painting the boy's face in strips of orange. His jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. They'll burn us out, he said flatly. They'll try. I moved to the side of the window and waited. The first shot came without warning, a crack that splintered wood and filled the room with dust. The boy ducked instinctively, clutching the shotgun. I eased the Colt out, waited for a shadow to pass the window, and fired. A grunt, then the shadow went down in the snow. 2 shells, kid, I reminded him. Not yet. Another shot punched through the wall, close enough for a sliver to scratch my cheek. The torchlight swayed as the men advanced. Their voices were a low rumble, the kind of sound that traveled in your bones. The boy's hand brushed mine. There's another way out. Now you tell me? I didn't think you'd need it. He crossed to the corner and lifted a rough plank in the floor. Cold air rose from the darkness below. The tunnel, he said. Pa dug it to the woods. In case. I covered the window with one last shot, then dropped to the opening. The boy slid in first, the blanket still wrapped around his shoulders. The space was narrow and smelled of dirt and old roots. We crawled on hands and knees, the sounds of boots and shouted orders muffled but still close. The tunnel spat us out behind a stand of pines thick enough to hide us. From here, I could see the shack, torchlight flickering over its crooked roof. The smirker stood near the door, rifle in hand, shouting for the others to spread out. They don't know we're gone, I whispered. The boy's breath fogged in the cold. What now? I checked the Colt, 3 rounds left. My ribs ached from crawling, my muscles tight with the cold, and the knowing that this would end one way tonight. Now we end it, I said. We circled wide, snow muffling our steps. From the far side of the shack, I saw 2 men by the horses, their rifles slung, talking low. I motioned for the boy to stay. The first man didn't even see me until the barrel was pressed his back. The second went for his rifle, but I hit him hard across the jaw, sending him to the ground. The horses stamped nervously, breath steaming in the dark. The boy appeared at my elbow, the shotgun steady in his hands. Torch, he said, nodding toward the one stuck upright in the snow. I grabbed it, feeling the heat bite my fingers. We'll draw them out. The smirker was still barking orders when I stepped into view, torch in one hand, Colt in the other. Looking for me? I called. His head snapped around, surprise cutting the grin in half. You've got sand, I'll give you that. I've got more than that, I said, and dropped the torch into the snow between us. He raised his rifle, but before he could sight me, the boy fired. The blast of the shotgun tore through the quiet, knocking the smirker back into the wall of the shack. He crumpled, rifle clattering away. The others froze for a heartbeat too long. I fired twice, the Colt's report echoing off the trees. One man dropped, the other fled into the dark. The last, the older one with the gravel voice, took cover behind the corner of the shack. We closed in slow, snow crunching under our boots. The boy reloaded the second shell with steady hands. You don't have to, I began, but he shook his head. I do. The gravel-voiced man made his move, lunging out with a knife. The boy fired, the blast knocking the man back into the snow. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the ragged sound of our breathing. It was over. We stood there a moment, steam rising from the shotgun barrel, snow settling on the bodies. The torch guttered and went out, leaving the moonlight to silver the scene. The boy's shoulders slumped. They won't come back now. No, I said quietly. They won't. We dragged the bodies away from the shack, covered them with snow. It wasn't much of a burial, but the ground was frozen solid, and the cold would keep them until the wolves came. Inside, the fire was still alive under a bed of coals. The boy fed it, the light growing until it filled the small room with warmth again. He sat cross-legged, the blanket pulled tight, eyes on the flames. "You could go now," he said after a while. I leaned against the wall. "I could." "You won't," he said, and it wasn't a question. I shook my head. "Not tonight." He gave a small nod, as if confirming something he'd already decided. Pa used to say the fire's better when there's two to sit by it. I didn't answer right away. My mind was still on the way his hands had been steady with that shotgun, the way he hadn't looked away from what he had to do. There was steel in him, and that kind of steel didn't just come from living hard. It came from surviving it. The night passed quiet after that. I kept watch while he slept, the fire snapping low. Outside, the wind eased and the snow stopped falling. The first light of morning crept over the ridge, painting the trees in pale gold. When he woke, I was still by the fire, the blanket draped over both of us. "What now?" he asked. "Now we fix what's worth keeping," I said. "And we make sure no one else comes looking." His small smile was the first real one I'd seen from him. "Then you're staying?" I met his gaze and nodded. "Yeah, kid, I'm staying." He turned back to the fire, and we sat there in silence, the crackle of the flames the only sound between us. Out here, in a land that took more than it ever gave, we'd found something worth holding on to. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a man just passing through. I felt like I belonged. Morning came slow, the cold seeping into my bones despite the fire. I'd kept watch through most of the night, listening to the boys' breathing and the quiet outside, waiting for some sign that the trouble we'd faced hadn't truly passed. The snow outside was clean and unbroken, but I'd lived long enough to know peace on the frontier was like a thin crust on a frozen river, solid until the wrong step broke it clean through. The boy was already stirring, rubbing sleep from his eyes, the blanket slipping from his narrow shoulders. He looked different in the daylight, still thin, still wary, but older somehow. Not in years, but in the way his gaze held steady now, without the flicker of fear I'd seen before. "We're gonna need more wood," he said, like it was just another day, and not the morning after killing 2 men. "We'll get it," I said, pulling on my coat. "But we'll need more than wood if we're gonna keep this place." He met my eyes, understanding the unspoken part. The others would hear what happened. Word traveled faster than a bullet out here, and men with a taste for easy prey didn't let go just because their friends didn't come back. We stepped outside. The cold hit like a slap, clean and sharp, the air thick with the smell of pine and the faint copper of old blood. Snow crunched under our boots as we crossed to the woodpile. The boy carried a small axe, too big for his frame but swung with the easy rhythm of someone who'd been working since before he could read. I kept my eyes on the treeline, my ears tuned to the stillness. The land had a way of telling you when something was coming. By the time we'd stacked the fresh wood, I felt it, that prickle along the back of the neck that says you're being watched. I set the last piece down slow and straightened. "Inside," I said. The boy didn't argue. He'd felt it too. We moved quick, barring the door, checking the shotgun. The fire was still alive, but I let it burn low. No need to silhouette ourselves in the window. The first sign was the faint clink of metal on metal. Then a voice from the dark. "You've stirred up a mess, stranger." Different voice this time. Deep, measured, without the swagger of the smirker or the gravel-voiced one. Whoever he wasn't here for show. "What do you want?" I called. "Same thing as the last lot," the voice answered. "Except I know how to take it without leaving bodies behind." That told me 2 things he'd heard about last night, and he was either smarter or meaner than the ones before. I eased to the window and saw him. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a long coat dusted in snow and a rifle slung easy in his hands. 2 men flanked him, faces hidden by scarves. Behind them, tethered to a pine, were 3 more horses. 5 of 'em, I murmured to the boy. "Maybe more back in the trees. What do we do?" His voice was steady, but his hands tightened on the shotgun. "We don't wait for them to come knocking. We slipped out through the tunnel again, the cold biting harder in the open air. This time we didn't circle wide. We stayed low, using the pines for cover, moving toward the horses. The boy was fast, his steps light, the blanket gone now, replaced by his father's old coat. I kept him close, my Colt drawn, every sense alive to the crunch of snow and the sound of voices. When we reached the horses, I cut their reins loose. They stamped and tossed their heads, ears flicking at the smell of strangers. One gave a sharp whinny that carried through the stillness. Shouts followed. Boots pounded toward us. I grabbed the boy's arm and we moved, slipping into the trees as the horses bolted in 3 directions. The first man came crashing after them, rifle in hand. I stepped out behind him, pressing the Colt to his back. "Drop it." He froze, then did as he was told. The boy picked up the rifle and backed away, eyes fixed on the man. "That's one less to worry about," I said, and sent him walking into the trees unarmed. The others were closing in. I could hear the leader's voice, low and sharp, giving orders. They weren't rushing this time. They were hunting. We moved again, circling back toward the shack. The fire inside was dead now, the room cold and dark. I positioned us by the window, watching as the leader stepped into the clearing. He stood there a moment, surveying the place, then looked straight at the window. "You've got spirit," he called, "but spirit won't save the boy." The boy's jaw clenched. "Don't listen to him." I already wasn't. The leader raised a hand, and the 2 men with him began to spread out. They meant to flank us. I waited until they were close enough, then fired twice in quick succession. One man dropped, the other dove for cover. The leader didn't flinch. "You can't hold out forever," he said, stepping forward. "Long enough," I answered. The boy moved to the other window, covering the side. I saw him tighten his grip on the shotgun. His breath was slow, controlled. He was ready. The leader fired once, the shot splintering the doorframe. I fired back, my last round in the Colt punching into the snow at his feet. Then I heard the sound I'd been waiting for, the sharp crack of a branch breaking under weight. Someone was coming up behind the leader, quiet but fast. From the trees stepped a man I hadn't seen in 2 days, tall, lean, with a rifle in hand and the same eyes as the boy. His father. The leader never saw it coming. The rifle but cracked against his skull, dropping him to his knees. The boy's father swung again, and the man went face first into the snow. The last of his crew fled without a word, vanishing into the trees. The boy lowered the shotgun, eyes wide. "Pa!" His father stepped forward, pulling him into a rough embrace. "You did good, son. You did real good." I lowered my own weapon, the cold finally sinking into my bones. "You took your time getting back." The man looked at me over the boy's head. "Had a few things to settle." His gaze softened just a touch. "Looks like you settled more." We dragged the leader into the shack, tied his hands, and stoked the fire until the room was warm again. Outside, the snow began to fall in slow, heavy flakes, covering the tracks, the blood, and the bodies already claimed by the night. By the time the fire burned steady, the boy was sitting between us, his eyes half closed, the weight of the last 2 days settling on him at last. "You staying?" his father asked me. I looked at the boy, then back at him. "For a while." He nodded once, as if that was enough. "Then you've got a place here." The boy's head rested against my arm now, his breathing slow and even. Outside, the snow kept falling soft and endless, covering the scars the night had left. And for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about where I'd run next. I was thinking about how to build something worth staying for. The frontier didn't give much, but sometimes if you were cold, hungry, and lucky enough to find the right fire, it gave you just enough to keep going. And maybe, if you were willing to fight for it, even a place to belong.